Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, depending on where you are, what time you are listening to this. My name is Winston, the content marketing guy. And today I have another amazing guest for you guys on Conversation with Marketers. Here with me, I have Matthew Sciannella. Just an amazing gentleman, amazing personality. But going into a bit of backstory, because it's funny how we met, because a lot of the people who actually come on this podcast, I actually met them through LinkedIn, just to show you how powerful a platform LinkedIn is. So if you guys aren't utilizing it, you definitely should. But I remember just making a post, and I think Matthew had engaged in it. Well, he did engage in it, and I saw that he worked at Abicor. And I was kind of fascinated because for some reason I got a lot of views just from Matthew engaging in that one post. So I'm like, Abacor, what is that? So I clicked on it and I realized that it's well, I'm going to let Matthew talk a bit more about it, but based on what I'm seeing, it's really a manufacturing company, or it operates in the manufacturing space. And I was very fascinated with that, because a lot of the guests that I've had before, they come from or have background in a lot of the traditional marketing spaces, such as tech, financial services, retail, but I've never had a guest that focuses on manufacturing. So I definitely wanted to bring Matthew on for him to share his insights, especially if anyone in the audience, is in that same space as well. So Matthew is actually the director of marketing for Abicor Binzel, which I mentioned is a manufacturing company. And he has extensive experience in marketing, manufacturing, in the finance space as well, with a focus on demand generation, content marketing, social media marketing for both organic and paid. And he's also the marketing modernizer, which is something that I definitely want to turn to you right away, Matthew, as we get started on this. So welcome to Conversation with Marketers.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. By the way, I got the last name 100% correct first time, so kudos to you on that.
All right, thanks a lot, Matthew. So as I said, let's start with marketing modernizer. Let's start there, because when I saw the title, it really grabbed my attention. Like, tell us what that's about.
Yeah, so I guess that really captures sort of what I do in the space that I do it in. So manufacturing for, by and large, if you look across the space, whether you want to call it the industrial space or the manufacturing space, usually they have very antiquated ways of doing their marketing. They're very trade show focused, very print ad focused, very like open houses and things of that nature. It's very one-to-one, human to human. And that's a good thing for sure, but there's not a lot of utilization of content marketing, of using all the different content avenues that, a lot of people in SaaS and tech have at their disposal. There's not a high degree of utilization of that. So my sort of ethos going into a manufacturing company like Binzel, the one that I work for, is to modernize the way that they do marketing, introduce inbound marketing, content marketing, show them the value of it, the reach of it, and how it can bring pipeline into the company. There's a lot of challenges to doing marketing and manufacturing, and we're gonna dive into that, I'm sure. But really, when it comes to modernizing, it's simply just getting on board with these modern digital tactics that so many other companies and other spaces are doing really effectively.
All right, awesome. Well, I don't want to get ahead of our conversation, because how I always like to start these podcasts to give our audience an idea of who our guests are, is I like to start with the journey. Like, how did you get involved in marketing? How did you get involved in the marketing space? Like, what was the journey, and what was the story behind that led to you where you are right now?
Yeah, sure. I'd love to get into that. I came out of college as an English major. I was an English lit major, and I was a writer. Like, I loved writing. Writing was definitely my passion. I did everything from short stories to poetry to just, long form essay writing. And I really enjoyed all of that. So coming out of school, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. I kind of fell into doing technical writing. So I did that for both an architecture engineering firm, and then I did it for a design build construction firm. So in total, I did that for about 8 years. I the job was okay. I never loved it. I was proficient at it, proficient enough at it to keep getting hired and getting paid relatively well, but it wasn't really making me happy. So I kind of wanted to assess my professional journey and decide, like, well, what do I really want to do the rest of my life? What do I love doing? And what I love doing more than anything is creating stuff. And so I needed to find a way to channel that. So when I was kind of looking at the broader landscape of jobs and professions out there and just seeing what spoke to me, I saw marketing as really kind of the path for me. So I went back to school to get a marketing management degree, which it really hasn't proven super useful for me as much as just, getting into the job and doing it day to day. But it was just something to get me qualified for these jobs to apply for. And so at first I went to my last employer and asked them to change my role to do marketing full time, and they told me no. And so once that happened, I was like, okay, I don't have a future here. So I ended up going to my current company, Abacor Binzel. They hired me on as the marketing manager, and great story about how I actually got that job. So I was competing with somebody who was a lot more experienced than me in marketing. I really had only done marketing sort of part-time at my last job. So I basically went through the company after I got through the phone interview process, and I audited them like front to back on their digital footprint. Went through their website, went through their social media channels, saw research if they were doing anything on AdWords, and I went into my in-person job interview with like this 12-page marketing plan, and I told them, like, this is everything I will do for you if you hire me for this job. And my president and my sales director, who both hired me, still have that marketing plan to this very day. And said, like, as soon as you handed me that plan, I already knew you were my guy. So, that's just a lesson for anyone looking to get into the space. Like, when you go the extra mile in that job interview, like, you will stand out even if you're not the most experienced person. So I ended up starting at Binzel. I spent my first 6 months sort of auditing the way they did. I'd never done a job like that before where they sold through distribution. It was a product and not a service I was selling.
Right.
I went through all the things that they did: print advertising, trade shows, what they did on social media, the little bit that they were doing to date. And I said, all right, I'm going to do my predecessor's job for 4 to 5 months just to get the hang of it, and then I'm going to make this my own job, which is exactly what I did. So I did that existing job, and then I started to put little lead gen, demand gen tactics in place, got us started in content, and we're going to, again, I hope, cover that in more detail. And that's kind of led to where I'm at today, which is, now director of marketing for the US and Canada, working with my colleagues in Germany and in Brazil and in Mexico and in the UK, content marketing initiatives and just digital marketing in general. And yeah, it's been a great journey. I could not enjoy more what I do. This has definitely been really the career change of a lifetime for me. I just love what I do day to day.
Awesome. Well, first of all, kudos to you for taking that approach. I mean, I love that going the extra mile, putting together that 12-page marketing plan. That's definitely something. So that's amazing. How long have you been at Abacor or Binzel?
Yeah, I've been at Binzel since 2016. So it'll be 4 full years, I guess, coming up here. Or yeah, I think 4 full years. So I've been there since 2016. So yeah, it'll be about 4 years after this year.
Okay, and the next question I want to get into, like, when you first went there, or I shouldn't say when you first went there, because you said for the first 4 to 5 months you did your predecessor's job to kind of get the hang of it in terms of their approach, their old approach, before you brought in your new content inbound marketing focused approach. Like, how difficult was it to really introduce this new concept to the president, to the senior executive body? Say, hey guys, I know you've been doing it like this for probably the last, 5, 10, 20 years that you've been around, but let's shift and let's start doing it like this. Like, how difficult or how challenging was it for you to actually get that buy-in from them to switch gears?
I think for me it was a little easier than I think I anticipated, and that's only because I was able to promise them something that they never were able to get before out of their marketing, which was measurable objectives, right?
Right.
So I was able to go to them and say, look, if we go this route, I'll be able to tell you, how many people are reading these articles, how many leads we're getting from these landing pages, what our what kind of revenue gets tied to what kind of content. And then we'll be able to really just measure the success of the marketing program in a way we've never been able to do before. And so I got really lucky when we first started doing content marketing. I got a really quick win, and I got a really big quick win. And that really helped to springboard the momentum behind the content marketing that we've been doing to date as a result. And the other thing I did to help get that buy-in was I went to my sales team, and I went to each and every one of them and I pitched it. And I said, look, guys, I know the way we've been doing marketing forever has been this. And I know all of you don't really like what we're doing. And one of the other things I did, actually, I should mention this, is I surveyed my entire sales team as soon as I started to get their feelings on the marketing program to date. Because I wanted to see what they found useful and what they didn't find useful. And that gave me a lot of great insight into where they thought we should be going, into where to the things they thought didn't work. And then I also went through the trouble of surveying my customers, which was gave me a varying degree of good insights. Really, I wanted to see what kind of social media channels they were doing, how much brand recognition we had, and I was able to get some decent feedback, especially from the open-ended comments in regards to that. So I was able to take the feedback from my sales team and the feedback from customers that we had that I was able to reach, bring that to my president, bring that to my top management and say, all right, look, this is the lay of the land as far as we're concerned. So this is what moving to this new way of doing marketing, content marketing, digital marketing is going to net us from a promise if we were to go that route. So that was how I was able to get buy-in. And then once we got up and running, we ran our first major campaign around a topic, and I was able to get one of my sales guys who really was excited about it to be my subject matter expert on this topic. We were able to get a really big pipeline opportunity, almost $200,000 from it, within the first 3 months, and that really sprang the entire program from there. And it's been a pretty steady trajectory ever since.
Awesome. And one of the things I want to ask you after surveying, because you said something or you made a point about surveying your sales team because you wanted their input, and I smiled when you said it, because one of the challenges, I don't know how it is with other countries or other markets, but I know for Jamaica specifically, one of the biggest challenges that I have, that a lot of business owners have when it comes to marketing or senior management, is that it's not really tied to, as you said, measurable objectives. It's things like, hey, we can, get you a lot of followers, we can get you a lot of engagement, social mention, stuff like that. But it's not really tied to a specific, I would say, revenue or business growth or business results, metric that, they can look and say, all right, we can see the value in marketing. So what was that conversation with your sales team like? What did they find useful and what they didn't find useful? That probably even someone listening to this who is a marketer can get from this as to how they can really change how they approach marketing to be more, I don't want to use the word valuable, but how it can be more business goal oriented.
Sure. So one of the things in manufacturing specifically that is a very, very big component of it is the idea of the catalog, the product catalog. And the product catalog in manufacturing has, the pretty picture and the technical specifications and the part numbers, and then there's a brief amount of description. So
right.
One of the things my sales guys, came back to me with constantly is all I have to send my customers or my leads are catalogs. There's no other content really for me to give them to check out, either video stuff on our YouTube channel or really good blogs or ebooks or things like that, where they can really dive deep on some of these topics and become more well-versed on the topic. So, when they came to me and said, look, our catalogs really are all I have, they told me look, we need to change that, and we need to come up with a content marketing strategy for you guys to give people additional pieces of resources to check out as you are taking them down that buyer's journey, and hopefully leading to a purchase or get yourself in the door for a visit. So that was definitely one of the things I surveyed them about, was what did they find useful and what did they find not useful. And then after I got their individual comments, I actually just called them afterwards and said, okay, like I want to go through your responses because I want to get more detail behind some of your more interesting answers to these questions. So I got some guidance from my sales director, definitely, about like, look, these are my high performing sales guys who really know their stuff. You know, I would start with them, and then I would go to the other guys after that if you find you need more information. So, you know, you got to work with your other colleagues, your other team members, especially on the sales side, and say, all right, look, I mean, this is what I have and who I want to call. Tell me, kind of guide me through that next process and who I should be speaking to get even more insight. Because if your sales guys aren't going to use the content that you're making, it's really not useful for you. Right. Either that or your content needs to be found and consumed a lot by search, or if you're going to promote it with paid. So yeah, I really want to make sure that I had my sales team on board with what I was doing, and that they understood what we were doing and why we were doing it and how they fit into that process. Because if your sales team doesn't understand that, they're not going to get it. They have their day-to-day job is to sell, right. And your marketing stuff is supposed to just help them along that path. So you need to make sure you have them on board and that they understand how to use your content properly as you're creating it, and then also give them a window into where it sits and resides and where they can access it as well. I mean, sometimes the level of education that goes into arming your sales team goes into something that basic. So, I mean, you always need to make sure you're keeping that in mind as well.
Yeah, I love that. I love your response. And the reason why is I was just smiling the entire time. I love your response because that's pretty much how I see marketing, at least one side of marketing. And I think the issue why, you know, marketing teams, sales teams are always butting heads is because marketing is focused on things like, hey, you know, brand awareness, which I'm not saying those things aren't good and useful, but at the end of the day, you know, brand awareness for what exactly? Like, what are we trying to get brand awareness for? Like, it's not enough just to, as you say, you know, do the trade shows, have the banners and, you know, flyers, whatever the case may be, just so people see your brand and know who you are. But it has to go a step further to actually, you know, as I mentioned before, create some sort of business result. So I like how you mentioned that marketing, you know, job are a part of it is really to assist the sales team to make their jobs easier in terms of, you know, getting through that door, that first meeting and closing the deal and getting the business. So let's go back to where we started around, you know, you being a marketing modernizer, because on your LinkedIn it says that you work with companies and fellow marketers in the industrial and manufacturing space looking to jumpstart and modernize their operation. So what I would love is like a breakdown, like a process, like how do you go about your marketing and sales process? What does your buyer's journey look like as someone in the industrial manufacturing space in terms of first modernizing for manufacturers, and then how that entire new process looks like?
Sure. So I guess I should start with the challenge of doing marketing within manufacturing, because that really helps kind of frame how you want to make your content. So manufacturing is a very difficult space to market in. I should preface that because by and large, unlike SaaS or tech, manufacturers usually have a lot of products. Like, you're not selling 3, 5, 10 products. You're selling like 100, 500, 1,000 products. So you need to figure out what you want to prioritize within your product suite to do marketing around. The other thing is, like, there's a lot of part numbers. So there's always a lot of demand on that to make sure that you have accurate information within your landing pages and things of that nature. When you're creating, you have to create product pages, you have to create catalogs. It's just part of the deal. So you need to make sure that that stuff is accurate. And then the other challenge is you're always, I mean, most manufacturers, at least the ones that I've seen within, and I should say that I work in the welding space specifically within manufacturing. So my company sells welding equipment, welding torches, robotic welding equipment, robotic periphery, fume extraction equipment, laser welding equipment. All of this stuff is sold through distribution. So So tying that buyer's journey back really comes down to staying on top of your sales team and making sure that you're actively tracking your leads and how they progress through the buyer's journey, because it's not like you're selling direct where you know where that transaction ends and you can immediately tie it. There's a distributor partner that you have to actually keep tabs on as well, and so there's always a lot of gray area with it that you sometimes just need to accept, but you also need to make sure you're staying on top of it and tracking it properly. So those are like the challenges of marketing within a manufacturing space. Like those are all like really big challenges that you're constantly working and tweaking to overcome with your sales team. So in terms of creating a content strategy around that, so we have the challenge of you have a lot of different products you sell and you sell through distribution. So when you're selling a lot of products, one of the things you have to do is find the product groups that you can kind of group together into a topic, and then start making content around that topic and do your due diligence, do keyword research, do a little bit of research on social media, check out hashtags and things of that nature. Even do a little bit of like Google ads to your product pages just to see what those kind of search queries look like. You really want to find those keywords and those key topics that people are searching around for these topics. So the first big success that we had was doing a campaign around fume extraction. Now, when you're dealing with manufacturing, these search volume numbers are going to inherently be smaller, so you just need to accept that. So if you look at fume extraction, for instance, on Google, it's about 5,000 to 6,000 queries a month. Now that in our space is pretty good. I mean, there's nothing to sneeze at. So you actually really want to attack that keyword. That's a high value keyword. So we started to create content around fume extraction. We created like a guide around it. I started looking at other things around. I basically cover fume extraction in every single way that I could, from breaking down fume extraction torches to breaking down how it works on a broad level, to breaking down questions that people have, problems people have, and then you kind of attack that topic from all sides, and then you create like a large kind of pillar page around it, which is what we have, and then ancillary content around it, which is your blogs and stuff. And then as you find things that are successful within that topic, then you start creating video around it. So when you find a blog, for instance, that does really well, or you see a keyword that has a lot of search query, you start to build video around that blog topic as well, because that helps you rank kind of in multiple areas. So if you search for I just talked about fume extraction, but another topic would be like contact tips or welding nozzles. Welding nozzles are like a little consumable that everyone has to replace within their welding torch at some point or another. So we have like a very long blog post around welding nozzles. And then once I found that blog post did really well, I made a video basically on that same blog. So if you search for welding nozzles on Google, you're going to see that I have the first blog result and the first video result on YouTube as a result of that. Because if you're finding what works well for you, and then you just keep diversifying that content up into different kinds of content, that's going to eventually meet people on each place that there are and how they consume content best, whether that's through video, through reading, through audio, and that's how you'll end up getting the most awareness for your products and solutions.
All right, great. That's awesome, and I didn't even think about that, because how I typically approach content marketing is to create, as you said, you create one piece of long form, but then you repurpose it into several. So in this case, it will be a blog post, and then you repurpose it into several other types of content. But for someone who doesn't necessarily have that space of time, or their main function isn't necessarily around content creation, I think your way is a really great way to approach it, where you have a lot of written articles, but then you only focus on creating videos for the ones that are actually effective from that, keyword intent-based search that people will be focused on. So I actually like that approach.
Yeah, and it's important when you're doing video also, like, do best practices for your video. So if you have the budget, get that video transcribed, post that transcription up on the YouTube video, caption your videos as well if you want to share it on LinkedIn or on Facebook, and you want people to have retention, caption the video. Most people will watch video without sound on. So make sure that you're doing that. Also, like in manufacturing, this really happens a lot. A lot of people in the manufacturing space want to make video of just their products without having somebody on camera explaining it because they don't have a person who's comfortable on camera. If you're the marketer, sometimes that just has to be you, and you have to be the person willing to get in front of the camera and explain it and become an expert yourself. I mean, when we had trouble getting started with video because we were too often trying to just film the product doing its thing, like highlight videos. And while those are cool and they're nice and they're very visually appealing, it doesn't really educate people much on the solution or the product or the problems with it. So we ended up just saying, okay, we need to put someone in front of the camera to explain it. And so when you can't get a subject matter expert, you got to make yourself the subject matter expert. So go to your product team or go to your engineering team and have a script summary, get it approved, and then get in front of the camera yourself and be the person explaining it. I got much better at my job by doing that because I had to learn the products, and I got so much more knowledge about the products from having to do content like that. And I did it really out of necessity because it had to be done. And your content stands out when you have someone in front of the camera explaining the product. If you look at some of the really, really, really good in the welding space, let me say in particular, the really good channels in the welding space, which are like, and I'll give some examples for people, weld.com or Welding Tips and Tricks. Those guys always have somebody in front of the camera explaining what they're doing. And that's why they have such a huge following base for sure. But that's why they have so much loyalty, because they have a human to connect to and listen to and guide them through that content. And when you're not using the human component in your video, you're really doing yourself a disservice, and you're cheating yourself out of a chance to build a relationship with that person who's consuming your content.
Right, great. So you mentioned, I think that's one difference that you really spoke about in terms of how the manufacturing space differs from like tech or e-commerce. What other differences do you normally see? Because a lot of these other spaces, whether it's tech, whether it's finance, retail, as I mentioned, these are usually marketing heavy, in the sense that a lot of people focus on marketing in these areas, but manufacturing not so much. So what are some of the differences that you typically see between like manufacturing and other industries?
Whew, that's a loaded question. I think one place I would start is how manufacturing companies use social media differently than other companies. And in that sense, what I mean is I think that's another space where it's very antiquated. There's a couple smaller manufacturers, at least in the welding space, who I think do it pretty well, all told. But if you look at like some of the really big not just distributors and dealers out there, but also like the really big conglomerate manufacturers, like on the whole, like their social media strategy really leaves a lot to be desired. They have, in my opinion, a lot more opportunity that they could take advantage of than what they currently do. And part of that is like they have such a huge team of like subject matter experts, and they're not teaching them how to use social media correctly. I think you see this on LinkedIn, and I see this on LinkedIn a lot as well. It's like people really working on their personal brand. Like that's a huge thing. I mean, that's part of the reason why I'm on this podcast, and that's why you do this podcast, right? You have subject matter experts within your company. You should really, really be focusing on teaching them how to use LinkedIn properly. Everything from their profile. And when you read my profile, you're basically were speaking to me, because that's one thing I'm working with my own sales team on, is like fix your headline on your profile to be client facing and forward facing. Like describe what you do and who you do it for. Like that's a really important thing to make sure your sales team is doing. It's more important that your sales team does that than your marketer does it, frankly.
Right.
So take the time to teach your sales guys how to use a channel like LinkedIn correctly. And then on your business page, like make sure that you're diversifying your content up, utilizing long form, like use that text space to do some long form posting. There's a couple different content pieces on LinkedIn that I think are really interesting that I don't see a lot of companies doing, one of which is slide decks. So the slide decks are really nice features to use on LinkedIn because A, it does exactly what LinkedIn wants you to do. It keeps you on the channel. And B, like I said about diversifying your blog content in the video, you can break out your long blogs, your 2,000 word blogs, and you can make 2 to 4 slide decks off of them and put them up on LinkedIn as like really short consumable slide decks. And it gets a ton of engagement. I've done it a couple times, and
Yeah.
I've gotten like
It does.
I've gotten like 80 something clicks. I've gotten 5,000 views of it. And it's because the LinkedIn algorithm loves it, because it keeps people on LinkedIn, and it matches your audience's attention span, which is something like short and easy to consume, and they slide right through it. So, I mean, one way that you can stand out in the manufacturing space is don't do the same boring stuff on social media that you see your competitors doing. Really get out there and experiment and diversify yourself and stand out. I mean, our follower count on LinkedIn is growing like crazy. We've gone from like 3,000 to 5,000 pretty much just organically in the last, I want to say, 9 to 12 months. And it's really just been because we've been really aggressive diversifying content and getting it out there, and doing it differently. Like you can't be afraid to try new stuff and see what works. So, and that's one way I would encourage anybody in the industrial space to try to differentiate between their competitors within their space is experiment a lot on social media. That's where you're going to find where people are. And that's where you're going to build the most brand awareness for your company at this point.
Right. So going back to the LinkedIn page, you mentioned about diversifying content, standing out, not just in the manufacturing space, but in general. Because one of the things I've realized in speaking with a lot of people is that it's not as easy for them to grow a LinkedIn page. I mean, with Instagram or Facebook, sure, it's easy. Like, you just put out content, or you put out social ads, and you get a lot of followers to that page. But with LinkedIn, one of the things I've realized, and even though my page isn't growing, the content marketing guy isn't growing like massively, but one of the things I realized that makes it have like very steady daily, weekly, monthly growth is putting out valuable content. And valuable in this sense means content that's helpful, that's useful, that's educational. Like, I realize when I do that consistently, my LinkedIn page slowly and steadily grows. Like, what other advice, or I guess I could say, what other ways you could suggest that people can use to grow their LinkedIn page? Because, I mean, you just mentioned that you grow Denzel's page from 3,000 to 5,000 in 9 to 12 months, which is pretty impressive for LinkedIn. What other advice could you share with the audience on how to do that?
Well, I think you said it. It really was objectifying your content. So going back to the challenges in the manufacturing industry and things I see people do that I think they should be going away from is a lot of manufacturers on their social pages and with their content in general, like their blogs or their news section or their videos, very, very product focused. Like, here's our branded product and here are all these features and benefits, and this is why you like it. As opposed to just taking a step back from that product, describing what makes it special without mentioning the product itself. Or like in the case of fume extraction, which I mentioned earlier, I basically just took my product away from all the content that we were making around it and just said, let's just talk about all the aspects of fume extraction that people need to know. There's just a lot of 101 education out there in terms of what kind of suction you need, what kind of position your welder has to be in, how should I be evaluating fume extraction systems. Like, really just take your product away from your content and just talk about that topic in the most objective manner possible. Like you said, people really want to learn more so about that topic than they do about your product.
Right.
So if you're building awareness around yourself by talking about that product in the most valuable way, when they eventually want to move forward with a product, they'll remember that they read you, and they'll come to you and say, hey, you guys taught me more about this topic than anybody out there. What solutions do you have for this topic? And that's what they call playing the long game. And that's really what I try to drive home with our content strategy. I really, even when I talk to my sales guys and we're making blog content, and sometimes your sales guy can't help but talk about the product, you got to steer them back into the topic. Or take what they gave you, and this, like, you can take that step back if you have enough knowledge yourself, and just make that objective, and make it without agenda for people who are consuming it. That's where we've had the most bang for our buck, is by, instead of talking about benzyl contact tips or benzyl fume extraction, saying, okay, here's how contact tips are made. These are the different processes that you can use to make them, and the pros and cons of each. These are the different materials you can use for contact tips and the pros and cons of each. These are the common problems you have with contact tips and how you can overcome some of them. Really without mentioning our product at all. Like I don't mention that we make silver-plated contact tips or copper chrome zirconium tips. No one really cares about our branded contact tip. They care about, what does that material do necessarily for the process that I'm welding. And so if you focus on the topic as opposed to the product, you're going to engender a lot more loyalty. People will trust you a lot more, and people will come back to your content and trust it. And your sales team can use it as well a lot, especially with, kind of top funnel sort of prospects who are not quite ready to hear about your branded solution. They just want to get more information on the subject in question. So that really helps your sales team a lot in that early part of the buying process.
All right, great. And well, before we actually started recording, one of the things that you were talking about, just sharing your experience with me on how marketing in the US, Canada versus other territories around the world. Like, talk to us about your experience where that is concerned. Like, how does marketing in the US or Canada differ from other regions that you have business partners for benzyl?
Oh man, so I've learned a lot working for an international company in terms of cultural differences and the way kind of things work country to country. So two things stand out in my opinion. One is the value of a certain email, and then the other is social media channels that are popular. So in the US, I think what everyone is seeing right now, who's like really paying attention to it, is LinkedIn is really, really popular. Instagram, really, really popular right now. A lot of people are on these channels. But if you go to countries like Brazil, and I have a small team in Brazil who I talk with fairly regularly. Like in Brazil, it's Facebook and it's WhatsApp, and then it's Instagram, and LinkedIn definitely not very popular at all down in Brazil. It's much more people using Facebook in Brazil for business purposes and for business marketing. And then similarly with Brazil, the value of an email. So one of the things that's interesting with Brazil is it's very common to use your personal email address as your business email because people change jobs very often in Brazil. So if someone gives you a Gmail email address in Brazil, as a prospect, that's actually just as valuable as having someone from General Motors giving you an email address with their General Motors email domain, because people bounce around from position to position, and it's the best way to stay in touch with them. And they use it often to conduct business in. So that was very interesting when I was talking with them about when I was getting lead gen and demand gen started with Brazil. I worked with them relatively closely, getting landing pages set up and stuff like that for them. And they told me that was, that's okay. It's not a big deal for us. I'm like, well, that's really interesting. If I had a huge list of Gmail addresses, I would probably think of not using them or uploading them or throwing them away. And they're like, nope, totally cool and fair to use that. If you go to Europe, in the UK and Germany, much more, it's back to more of the US mentality where a business email address is far more valuable than just a normal personal email domain. So definitely something for anyone who does marketing internationally and works with an international team to just check and research. You might be surprised the kind of findings that you get working with your subsidiaries or your sister companies about what is a cultural norm for B2B business and then what is not. I was personally surprised when that happened, and now when I see a Gmail address from Brazil, I don't even bat an eye. It's a very legit prospect as far as I'm concerned.
And it's funny that you mentioned that. I'm not particularly sure how it is in Jamaica, because I think in Jamaica it's a mix between people who use like personal Gmail emails as well as their company emails. But I know for me, and probably this is a bit of bias on my part, but for me, I'm much more likely to think someone is serious about business if I see a business email. Like if you say you have a business and you give me like an Outlook or a Gmail, I'm more hesitant to say, all right, I'm not really sure if you're serious about business, because if you are, then why not have a business email, even if you don't necessarily have a website, but still have like a business email that I think with Google Mail it's like $5 US per month. I'm not sure if it's more now, which doesn't really cost you that much. So that's really how I look at it in terms of emails. So before we actually end this podcast, Matthew, is there anything that you want to share with the audience? Any tips, any advice, anything at all that just comes to mind that probably we didn't speak about?
Yeah, I want to. Excuse me. I want to specifically speak to anyone in the industrial space who does marketing. If you are thinking about doing content marketing, thinking about getting your company into inbound, I would tell you right now to take that leap and do it. Start building the business case for yourself. I can promise you that the upshot and the benefits of it will far outweigh the consequences. And if you do it right, if you study up, follow people like Winston. There's tons of influencers and tons of people on LinkedIn. The guys from HubSpot who just talk about this like for eons. And just make sure that you're educating yourself on it as you go forward. You're never going to be a finished product when you get started. I learn new stuff all the time on content marketing, social media, search engine optimization, search engine marketing. Every single week I learn something new and I try to apply it. It's a constant learning process. There's no such thing, imposter syndrome is certainly real, but I promise you everyone is out there learning as they go along. And if you're thinking about making that leap, I promise you it will be worth it if you go ahead. So again, start building that business plan, start talking to your sales team, start figuring out the kind of content you want to make, experiment, iterate, and eventually you're going to get there. I promise you.
Awesome, Matthew. So how can people reach you, get in contact with you if they want to learn more about what you do and how they can do it as well?
Yeah, sure. So I am most active on LinkedIn. I believe I'm Matthew J. Sciannella on LinkedIn, or maybe just Matthew Sciannella. I'm sure you'll tag me on the post so people know how to spell that, because there's about 11 letters in Sciannella, so I won't go through spelling it here. You could also reach me on my business email is msciannella. I guess I will spell it now. SCIANNELLA @abacoreusa.com. And you can get in touch with me through either of those methods. I'd be happy to talk with anybody about what they're doing and how I can help them. I don't have all the answers, but I can certainly give you a good direction to go in. And yeah, I'd be happy to chat. I love connecting with people and love just talking strategy and content and tactics.
All right, great, Matthew. So thanks again so much for your time. Thanks again for being on, sharing with us. It was informative even for me, because as you're talking, throughout this entire episode, I started to pick up a few ideas that even I could use in how I approach my marketing. So really valuable content. Really appreciate you being on, Matthew.
Thank you. I appreciate it. This is my first podcast I've ever done, Winston.
Really?
Yes, thank you for initiating me. This was a lot of fun.
No, you definitely should reach out to more people and get some more podcasts.
Especially
in the manufacturing industrial space, because I think you have a lot of useful knowledge that a lot of people could really use.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I definitely will. I had a lot of fun. I was a little nervous. I'm not going to lie. But, I had a blast.
You did great. Trust me, you did great.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Yep. You too.